Every year, humanity generates more than 2 billion tons of municipal waste, enough to fill Olympic-sized swimming pools millions of times over. But what if the very things once considered worthless could be recycled and even sold for more than their original value? From waste plastic transformed into paving bricks, old water pipes into handcrafted products, glass bottles repurposed as flood-resistant construction materials, to old tires converted into asphalt. These unusual recycling innovations are ushering in a new era for urban waste. But can these recycling models truly turn waste into a valuable resource for the future? Join Terran Works as we explore this question in today's video. To understand why these recycling models are attracting so much attention, we first need to look at the consequences of waste. Every year, the world generates more than 2 billion tons of municipal solid waste, and if current trends continue, that figure could approach 4 billion tons by the middle of the century. Not all of this waste is managed safely. Some is buried in landfills, some is incinerated, and some ends up in rivers and oceans, where tens of millions of tons of plastic continue to accumulate in aquatic environments each year. The impact extends far beyond massive landfills. Decomposing organic waste releases greenhouse gases. Plastics break down into microplastics that enter water, soil, and the food chain. Fishing nets, lines, and abandoned fishing gear left in the ocean can become ghost nets, trapping fish, sea turtles, seabirds, and many other marine animals long after humans have stopped using them. In urban areas, waste can clog drainage systems, contribute to flooding, generate unpleasant odors and leachate, and increase waste management costs. For these reasons, recycling is no longer just about keeping the environment clean. It is becoming a way to reduce pressure on the planet while recovering the value of materials that still have useful life left in them. From plastics, glass, old textiles, tires, coconut husks, and even spent coffee grounds, nearly every type of waste can enter a new production cycle and be transformed into construction materials, consumer goods, fuel, or handcrafted products with greater value than before. In Nairobi, Kenya, some plastic waste does not end up in landfills. Instead, it is sent to factories where it is transformed into paving bricks. After collection, the plastic is sorted, cleaned, and fed into shredding machines that cut it into small pieces. These plastic fragments are then mixed with sand and pigments before being fed into an extrusion machine operating at temperatures of around 300 to 400 degrees Celsius. Under this intense heat, the plastic softens and bonds with the sand, forming a malleable material with a paste-like consistency. The mixture is then transferred to hydraulic presses, where it is molded into shape. Each pressing cycle can produce multiple bricks at once. Once removed from the molds, the bricks are left to cool for a few minutes until they harden and are then stacked and prepared for sale. A pallet containing around 400 plastic paving bricks can sell for as much as USD 150, depending on the thickness of the bricks. According to the company, these bricks cost approximately 25% less than traditional concrete alternatives. The factory is capable of processing around 10 tons of plastic waste per month, and at certain points has recycled as much as 50 tons of waste within a single year. Plastic bags are among the most difficult types of waste to manage. They are thin, lightweight, easily contaminated, and are often used only once before being discarded. But in India, this seemingly worthless waste is being transformed into athletic footwear. The process begins with collection and cleaning. The plastic bags are washed using hot water without any chemicals and then left to dry in a warehouse. Once clean, workers stack approximately 8 to 10 layers of plastic bags on top of one another and feed them into a heat press machine. Under high temperature and pressure, the layers fuse together, creating a new material called Thelitex. This material is used to cover most of the shoe's upper section. The Thelitex sheets are then sent to a footwear manufacturing facility, where they are cut with metal molds to form the sneaker uppers. Other components are made from rPET fabric, a textile woven from recycled plastic bottles. Even the shoelaces are produced from recycled plastic materials. The beer bottle you drank from yesterday may not end up in a landfill. In Louisiana, millions of used glass bottles are being collected, crushed, and screened to create recycled sand. The process begins with glass bottles that residents either drop off at collection points or have picked up directly from their homes. The bottles are then fed into a crushing machine. Inside the system, the glass passes through conveyor belts and hammer mills, breaking into a mixture of sand, gravel, bottle labels, metal caps, and other contaminants. The next stage is screening and separation. Oversized fragments, paper labels, metal pieces, and bottle caps are removed from the material stream. The remaining glass is then sorted by particle size. Larger pieces can be sold as gravel, medium-sized particles are used as coarse sand, and the finest material has a texture that is almost powder-like. What makes this recycled sand particularly interesting is that it is not sold solely as a recycled construction material. A portion is packed into sandbags and distributed free of charge to residents for flood protection, as Louisiana frequently faces hurricanes, storm surges, and flooding. Coarser grades of the recycled sand are also used in coastal restoration projects, helping replenish material in areas affected by erosion. Over roughly 2 years, this initiative has diverted the equivalent of about 4 million beer bottles from landfills. In one shoreline restoration project near Lake Pontchartrain alone, approximately 10 tons of recycled sand were used. What was once considered nothing more than a discarded bottle is now being given a second life as a material that can help protect homes, coastlines, and entire communities. A cracked water pipe usually has little remaining value in the construction industry. But in South Africa, damaged PVC pipes are being cut, softened, and woven into baskets, plant pots, decorative trays, and high-end household items. The process begins with defective or broken PVC pipes that are rejected before they ever reach the market. Because each pipe can be up to 6 meters long, workers first cut them into shorter sections for easier handling. The pipes are then heated until they become soft and flexible. Once the material reaches the right consistency, a worker secures one end of the pipe and uses a blade to slice lengthwise along its surface, creating long, thin plastic strips. These PVC strips are then used much like weaving fibers. Workers first construct a frame and then weave the strips together to create the finished product. A single plant pot may require about 1 meter of pipe, while a laundry basket can use around 2 meters. Some items take roughly an hour and a half to complete, but in return, each piece has its own unique shape and distinctive plastic pattern. As demand has grown, some discarded PVC pipes have also been recycled into raw material. The old pipes are shredded into pellets, mixed with wax, and fed through an extrusion machine to produce new PVC strips with a thickness of around 2 to 3 millimeters, the ideal size for hand weaving. In Sierra Leone, discarded coconut husks are being collected and transformed into charcoal briquettes for cooking fuel. Each week, this initiative can collect around 2 tons of coconut waste. The raw material is first cleaned and then left to dry for about a week to reduce its moisture content. Once sufficiently dried, the coconut husks are placed in steel drums and carbonized for approximately 3 to 4 hours. During this stage, the fibrous husks and shells are converted into charcoal. The charcoal is then extinguished with water, dried again, and ground into a fine powder. The charcoal powder is mixed with water and a binding agent to form a thick paste. This is the most critical step in the process, as an incorrect ratio can result in briquettes that crumble easily, burn poorly, or fail to hold their shape. Once the mixture reaches the desired consistency, it is fed into an extrusion machine that compresses it into rectangular fuel briquettes. These are then left to dry for an additional 3 to 4 days before being sold. The greatest value of coconut shell briquettes lies in their potential to replace a portion of traditional wood charcoal. In some parts of Sierra Leone, as much as 70% of forest cover has been lost over the past 5 decades, partly because trees are cut down for fuel. If coconut waste can be converted into a viable energy source, pressure on forests can be reduced, while coconut vendors gain a productive use for husks that were once considered nothing more than waste. An old, broken skateboard does not necessarily have to end up in the trash. Instead, it can be transformed into valuable handcrafted wooden products. Inside every skateboard deck are multiple layers of maple wood tightly laminated together, specifically engineered to withstand heavy impacts and stress. After being collected, the decks are stripped of their grip tape, sanded to remove paint and graphics, and then cut into smaller pieces. These wooden pieces are carefully arranged by color, glued together, clamped until dry, and finally shaped on a lathe into wooden bowls, small tables, jewelry, or decorative items. What makes these products especially unique is that no two pieces are ever exactly alike. Every skateboard has its own combination of paint colors, wood layers, scratches, and history of use. When the decks are cut, reassembled, and turned into new forms, those colorful layers create distinctive patterns and grain-like designs. As a result, a discarded piece of sporting equipment is given a second life as a bowl, table, piece of jewelry, or decorative object that can be worth far more than the original waste material itself. Every year, hundreds of thousands of tons of fishing nets and other fishing gear are lost or abandoned in the ocean, becoming some of the most dangerous forms of plastic waste for marine life. But instead of continuing to drift through the water, these discarded nets can be collected and recycled into new nylon fibers. After being brought to ports or recycling facilities, the nets are sorted and thoroughly cleaned to remove salt, sand, seaweed, and other contaminants. They are then cut into small pieces, shredded, and processed to regenerate nylon pellets. These pellets are subsequently melted and spun into new yarn, which can be woven into carpets, clothing fabrics, swimwear, bags, and other sustainable fashion products. This is considered a form of high-value recycling because it does more than simply reduce plastic waste in the ocean. It transforms a discarded material into a valuable raw resource for the textile and interior design industries, creating a circular system in which waste becomes the foundation for entirely new products. Every year, more than 1 billion tires worldwide reach the end of their service life, creating a massive stream of rubber waste that is bulky, difficult to manage, and extremely slow to decompose. When stockpiled, discarded tires occupy large amounts of space, contribute to pollution, and can become a serious fire hazard. However, instead of being thrown away, used tires can be shredded into crumb rubber and incorporated into the production of rubberized asphalt. The recycling process typically begins with the collection of end-of-life tires. The tires are then sorted, cut into smaller pieces, and processed to remove steel wires, textile fibers, and other internal components. The remaining rubber is further ground into crumb rubber of various sizes. From there, it can be used in several applications: blended with hot asphalt to produce rubberized asphalt, compressed into rubber mats, used for playground and sport surfaces, manufactured into impact-absorbing materials and industrial padding, or reprocessed into raw material for new rubber products. When mixed with asphalt and aggregate, crumb rubber can improve the flexibility of road surfaces, helping to reduce cracking, lower traffic noise, and extend the lifespan of the pavement. As a result, a waste product that was once difficult to dispose of can be transformed into a valuable material for infrastructure and construction projects. Every year, the world generates around 6 million tons of spent coffee grounds after brewing. Rather than being treated as mere organic waste, coffee grounds are being transformed into raw materials for a wide range of new products, including cups, plant pots, and composite materials. The process begins with collecting used coffee grounds from cafes, restaurants, and processing facilities. The grounds are then filtered to remove impurities, dried to reduce moisture content, and finally ground into a powder. This powder is mixed with bioplastics, natural fibers, or binding agents to form a composite material. When heat-pressed or molded, the mixture can be shaped into reusable cups, plant pots, trays, storage containers, small furniture pieces, or decorative items. The value of this approach lies in turning a daily waste stream into a useful material. Coffee grounds help reduce the need for virgin plastic in products, provide a natural brown color, retain a subtle coffee scent, and align with the growing trend towards sustainable and eco-friendly consumption. These models show that waste can be turned into a resource, but they cannot solve the global waste crisis on their own. Even a small recycling plant processing a few dozen tons of plastic is still insignificant compared to the amount of waste a city generates every single day. Therefore, the greatest value of these initiatives does not lie in their ability to handle all waste, but in how they encourage each of us to be more mindful of the environment in our everyday choices. Kenya is not only an East African country known for its safari grasslands, lions, elephants, and coastlines along the Indian Ocean, but also a place facing growing pressure from waste. According to Kenya's Sustainable Waste Management Policy, the country generates about 22,000 tons of waste every day, equivalent to around 8 million tons each year, and about 40% of that waste comes from urban areas. In the capital city of Nairobi alone, around 2,000 to 2,500 tons of waste are generated every day, of which about 20% is plastic waste. What is worth noting is that not all of this waste is collected, sorted, or recycled properly. A large portion ends up in overloaded dump sites such as Dandora, which still receives about 2,000 tons of waste every day, creating major pressure on the environment, public health, and the urban system. But within this highly pressured picture, Kenya is also seeing the emergence of very creative recycling models. Here, waste is not only something that needs to be cleared away, but can also become raw material for a new production chain. To understand why Kenya can turn waste into art, we first need to look at a very familiar type of waste: flip-flops. From markets in Nairobi to coastal towns such as Mombasa, this type of footwear appears almost everywhere because it is cheap, lightweight, easy to buy, easy to wash, and well-suited to the hot climate, dirt roads, sand, and mud found in many low-income communities. Globally, more than 1 billion pairs of flip-flops are produced every year. In Kenya alone, in 2024, the country imported more than 183,000 pairs under the category of rubber or plastic thong sandals, not including those produced and traded within the domestic market. Because a pair often costs around $1 or even less in local markets, when the straps break, the soles wear down, crack under the sun, or get washed away after the rain, people usually throw them away and buy a new pair. It is estimated that more than 200 million pairs of flip-flops are discarded globally each year. But because they are made from synthetic rubber, plastic, or foam materials that are difficult to decompose, they can take decades or even more than 100 years to break down. In Kenya, these flip-flops can drift from residential areas into drains, canals, and rivers, then become trapped on beaches along the Indian Ocean. And when this type of waste appears in such large quantities, one question arises: can it be pulled out of the environment and turned into something more valuable? The answer in Kenya begins with Ocean Soul. Around 10 million flip-flops have been collected by this company from beaches, streets, and dump sites, turning Ocean Soul into one of the most prominent examples of handmade recycling in Kenya. The story began in 1997 when conservationist Julie Church came to the Kenyan coast and saw large numbers of discarded flip-flops. But instead of seeing them only as waste, she noticed something else. Local children were using old flip-flops to make toys. The idea was very simple. If children could turn discarded flip-flops into toys, adults could also turn them into works of art. From there, Ocean Soul gradually developed into a social model that combines waste cleanup, job creation, and art making. The company built a network of collectors, pays for flip-flops by the kilogram, and then brings the material back to its workshop in Nairobi. Here, things that once lay mixed with sand, mud, and seawater begin a completely different journey. They are washed, dried, cut into smaller pieces, glued into layers, and carved into shapes. Every week, collection groups can bring in about 1 ton of flip-flops, equivalent to more than 3,000 individual sandals. and this is still only a very small part of the waste drifting through the environment. Collectors often take part in weekly beach cleanup activities along the Kenyan coast. When they bring flip-flops to Ocean Soul, they are paid about 30 US cents per kilogram. This amount is not large, but it creates a very important mechanism. Waste begins to have economic value. When a discarded object can be exchanged for money, local people have more motivation to collect it, before the waves carry it farther away. After arriving at the workshop, the flip-flops are carefully washed by hand with water and detergent. Thanks to the hot climate, they usually take only about 2 to 3 hours to dry. From there, the artisans select the colors, the thickness, and the parts of the flip-flops that are suitable for each detail of the artwork. A single flip-flop is too thin to become a sculpture, so the artisans first have to build up the form before carving it. For small and medium-sized pieces, the flip-flops are cut according to templates, then glued together, layer by layer, with non-toxic glue. This step determines the initial shape of the product. To make an elephant, the artisan must first create the blocks for the body, head, ears, legs, and trunk before picking up a knife to carve. To make a whale, they have to calculate the curve of the back, the fins, the tail, and the belly. Interestingly, many artisans at Ocean Soul once worked in Kenya's traditional wood carving trade. When wood became scarcer after policies restricting logging, they transferred their old skills to a new material. The knives, cutting tools, and sanding machines are still similar, but the material is softer, more colorful, and less likely to cause splinters. The result is a sculpture with a very distinctive appearance. It feels handmade, carries modern colors, and tells an environmental story right on its own surface. Some of Ocean Soul's large artworks can take up to 3 months to complete, because almost the entire process is done by hand. You know, an elephant sculpture made from flip-flops was once given to the Pope when he visited Kenya in 2015. This shows that this recycled product has gone far beyond the scope of an ordinary souvenir. Ocean Soul often makes marine animal models such as turtles and whales to connect with the message of ocean protection. But its best-selling products are safari animals such as elephants and giraffes because they are closely associated with the image of Kenya in the eyes of international tourists. At one point, Ocean Soul also carried out a special project, making a full-size car for a car dealership in Alabama, United States. This artwork used about 4,500 flip-flops and took 3 to 4 months to complete. What is worth noting is that these artworks also have clear commercial value. On Ocean Soul's online store, elephant sculptures can range from about $26 for a small model to more than $570 for a large one, while some giraffe models can reach around $1,200 depending on size and complexity. But flip-flops are not the only type of waste in Kenya being given a new life cycle. If Ocean Soul saw value in the sandals drifting along the beaches, then in Nairobi, another group found opportunity in something even more familiar: old newspapers. Paper makes up a very large part of the urban waste stream. Globally, the world generates more than 2 billion tons of municipal solid waste every year, with paper and cardboard being among the largest material groups after organic waste and plastic. In Nairobi alone, some studies on waste composition show that paper can account for around 11 to 12% of household urban waste. With about 2,000 to 2,500 tons of waste generated every day, this means Nairobi could be throwing away hundreds of tons of paper and related materials each day. When buried in landfills, paper does not disappear harmlessly, as many people might think. Under the oxygen-poor conditions of a dump site, paper and other organic materials can decompose and produce methane, a greenhouse gas that is powerful in the short term. In Kenya, printed newspapers still play an important role because not everyone has regular access to the internet. That means many newspapers, after being read, can quickly become waste. This is where Momo Pencils saw an opportunity. Instead of letting old newspapers rot in landfills, the two brothers who founded the company decided to turn them into pencils. The idea sounds very simple. Use newspaper instead of wood for the body of the pencil. But for a thin sheet of paper to become hard like wood, comfortable to hold, able to write well, and marketable, they had to develop a process with many stages. A double-page newspaper spread can produce about 3 pencils, and to complete 1 pencil, Momo pencils has to go through around 9 stages. First, the newspapers are cut to the appropriate size. The leftover paper is not thrown away, but is used as filler material to fill the gaps between the rolled paper layers and the graphite core. This is a very important detail because it helps reduce waste almost as much as possible during the production process. The graphite core is the only material that the company does not source locally. Workers place the core on the sheet of newspaper, use wood glue to fix it in place, and then pass it through a rolling machine. The glue plays a special role. It helps the layers of paper stick tightly together, makes the pencil body harder, and creates a feel that is quite similar to wood. But this stage requires skill. If too much glue is used, the pencil will take a long time to dry. If too little is used, the pencil body may not be strong enough. After being rolled, the pencil tubes are placed under the sun, making use of Kenya's hot climate to dry them naturally. When it first started in 2017, Momo pencils produced only about 500 pencils a day. But thanks to the automation of several stages, its capacity can increase to as much as 100,000 pencils per day. Momo's pencils can be about 3 times more expensive than regular pencils, which Kenya mainly imports from China. And that is the biggest challenge when bringing the product to the mass market. For a shop owner, the question is very practical. If ordinary pencils can be bought for only a few shillings, why import a pencil that is much more expensive? This is exactly the contradiction between green products and a low-price market. Consumers often say they want to protect the environment, but when they have to pay extra, the decision is no longer easy. Therefore, Momo Pencils has to choose strategic customers. Businesses, schools, organizations, or brands that truly understand the value of environmentally friendly production and made-in-Kenya products. The company's biggest cost is wages. It pays workers about $15 per day, significantly higher than Kenya's minimum wage. This makes the product difficult to sell cheaply, but it also creates clear social impact. Not only recycling paper, but also creating better-paying jobs for local workers. More than 50,000 pencils have been donated by Momo Pencils, and their larger goal is to provide free pencils to 1 million children. In some classrooms, there may be around 60 students, but not every child has enough writing materials. Half the class has pencils, while the other half does not. When a child does not have a pencil, learning to write is no longer a simple matter. It becomes a very specific barrier, small but very real. Momo Pencils often visit schools where many students come from slums or poor families. On each trip, they bring not only pencils, but also tree seedlings to plant together with the students. So far, they have planted more than 10,000 trees. Therefore, a Momo pencil is not just a learning tool. It is a story. Old newspapers are saved from landfills, trees are preserved, workers have jobs, students have learning materials, and a new tree is planted into the ground.